A very good morning to all of you. Today I will discuss the constitutional law of India, the doctrines evolved by the Supreme Court while interpreting these provisions. So let me briefly delve upon the various doctrines evolved by the Apex Court while interpreting these articles. The first doctrine is doctrine of severability. Now, as is laid down in Article 13, that any law which is violative of Part 3 is void to the extent of inconsistency with the Part 3 of the Constitution and that law. But then, in a law, if portions of that law is violative of Part 3 and portions which are not violative of Part 3, they can be separated, then applying the doctrine of severability, only those parts which are violative of part 3 are declared to be void and those which are not violative are declared to be valid. This was laid down in for the first time in state of Vikaji versus state of MP. The next doctrine is the doctrine of eclipse. Now eclipse is a solar system phenomena in which if the three planets, the three celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, and the earth, if they come in a straight line, an eclipse is formed. But then this is a temporary phenomena. It can be a solar eclipse or it can be a lunar eclipse. So this temporary phenomena of eclipse is emulated in the doctrine of eclipse, in which it is laid down, say, the day on which the constitution comes into force, if some pre-constitutional law is violative of part 3, that law becomes void or inoperative. But then say after some time, due to a change in the constitution by amendment or some other reason, this conflict between the law and the part 3 of the constitution is no more there, then the law comes back into its former glory and the impediment is no more there. The brief period during which it was void will be declared to be in an eclipse state, and applying the doctrine of eclipse, the law comes back into its normal pre-constitutional state and it becomes a valid law. This example is again embodied in Vikaji versus state of MP. In this case, what happened was there were laws in the state of MP and Birar according to which only the state government could do the business of public transport in that state, which according to the Constitution of India, Article 19(1) G, that is freedom of trade, occupation and profession, was a fundamental right, and therefore this law being violative of article 19(1) G was unlawful, void. But then by the first amendment act of the constitution, the reasonable restrictions in the form of article 19, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they were inserted in the constitution, and therefore after first amendment act this law was no more violative of part 3, and therefore applying the doctrine of eclipse, it was construed that the earlier law revived again. This is doctrine of eclipse. Next we have doctrine of waiver. Now, what is waiver? Waiver means to give up or to forego. In the celebrated case of Vasisthar Nath versus Commissioner of Income Tax, this doctrine was applied. Or rather, this doctrine was not applied in the sense Supreme Court refused to apply doctrine of waiver. Now, what happened in this case? Vasisthar Nath, who was an assessee under the Income Tax Act, was charged with a penalty for violating some particular provisions of the Income Tax Act 1961, which was declared unconstitutional later on with a retrospective effect as being violative of Article 14. Then Basiswanath approached the Supreme Court, alleging that since the law on the basis of which he was penalized is violative of Article 14, and therefore he should get the refund of the penalty which he has already paid. Now, the government of India, through the Attorney General, claimed that by already paying the penalty, he has waived his fundamental right under Article 14 of the Constitution of India. And therefore, since he has waived his right, he cannot claim the refund. But the Supreme Court clearly laid down that no one can waive his fundamental right. The doctrine of waiver is not applicable in India. So that's why doctrine of waiver in case of fundamental rights is not applicable in India. The case is Commissioner of Income Tax versus Basiswanath. Next, let us come to a very important doctrine evolved by the Supreme Court of India in Navjyoti Housing Cooperative Society versus Union of India. It's a very interesting case. The doctrine is known as the doctrine of legitimate expectation. The class of constitutional law, for that matter, all laws, begins in a law school by differentiating between law and policy. Courts in all legal systems are entrusted with the responsibility to adjudicate. Adjudication means to interpret the law and not interfere in the domain of policy. Policy is the exclusive prerogative of the executive. Policies cannot be interfered with by the courts of a country. So in matters of policy, the high courts, or for that matter Supreme Court, cannot interfere. I am sure you all must have started your law classes with this concept in mind. Say for example, let me give you an example to clear the distinction between law and policy. Say the central government decides that the retirement age of all central government employees is hereby reduced from 60 to 58, and this rule applies, or this policy applies, on and from the 31st of December 2021. Now say a person who retires on, say, 1st of January 2022, can he go to the court and challenge that why should I be forced to retire just because I'm retiring one day after this policy comes into force? Why should I be discriminated? This is violative of Article 14 if his contention is like that. But then he will not be allowed any remedy by the court, because this is a pure question of policy as to when a particular rule or a particular law comes into force, and this cannot be challenged in the court of law. It is his misfortune. But then say a policy has been consistently followed in a system, in a legal system, in a country, in a state, for quite some time, say for a length of time which is more than 30 years, 40 years, 20 years. Now the political executive abruptly brings a change in that policy, for which some settled expectation in the mind of a stakeholder, or a legitimate expectation in the mind of a stakeholder, is shaken or is disturbed. Then can he approach the court and seek an answer from the executive that why abruptly, suddenly this change of policy was brought into being? Was it done bona fide or was it done mala fide to deprive someone of some entitlement? This was the precise question which came before the apex court in this Navjyoti Cooperative Housing Society versus Union of India. The facts of the case were very interesting. The Union of India, through some of its departments, was allotting plots of land to cooperative housing society. And this allotment of land is done according to, or it is prioritized according to seniority of the housing society. And the seniority of the housing society hitherto till this case was instituted was according to the date of registration of the society. But overnight, now this system was followed for the last 30 years. Now overnight, that particular department of the Union of India changed the criteria of seniority and made it the date of empanelment of the cooperative society in that department's panel or registrar's panel. Now, this Navjyoti Cooperative Housing Society approached the Supreme Court and said that since this policy is being consistently followed for the last 30 years, there was a legitimate expectation in our mind that this will be followed. This expectation has settled. Suddenly, the government department changes the criteria, changes the policy. Now, our question is, what was the compelling need? The bona fide of the requirement of this change in policy has to be explained by the executive to the court. Now, the court did take cognizance of the matter and asked the Union of India to explain what was the compelling need in changing this policy, because the legitimate expectation of a stakeholder is getting unsettled. The settled expectation is getting unsettled. This terminology is used in English law. In Indian law, we use the legitimate expectation of the stakeholder is disturbed. So in this case, the Union of India was unable to give a satisfactory explanation of change or shift in this policy, which pointed out to a suspicion that maybe to deprive the writ petitioner of the right to get the land, it could have been changed. So the Supreme Court, applying the doctrine of legitimate expectation, gave relief to this Navjyoti Cooperating Housing Society. But then in a later case, Kamdhenu Cattle Feeds versus Food Corporation of India, where this doctrine was again sought for by the writ petitioner, the Supreme Court did not allow. That was due to some other reasons, which is beyond the scope of this discussion. But then the doctrine of legitimate expectation is another very important doctrine which can be used by stakeholders if they feel that even by change of policy, their legitimate expectation is getting affected, or their settled expectation is becoming unsettled. Obviously, you will have to satisfy the court that your expectation is legitimate by continuous practice of the policy. This is a very important tool to get relief from the Supreme Court, even in matters of change of policy. Another very important doctrine is prospective overruling. Prospective overruling was applied by the Supreme Court in order to justify its decision in Goloknath versus State of Punjab, when it declared in that case that the word law in Article 13 includes constitutional amendment. When it was put the question, so what happens to those constitutional amendments already done? Then the court, applying the doctrine of prospective overruling, said whatever is done. Henceforth, the parliament has no power to amend part 3. This is known as doctrine of prospective overruling. Another very important doctrine, although it is not directly related to part 3, but then it's very favorite for examiners, is the doctrine of repugnancy, which in American constitutional law is known as doctrine of occupied field. We all know that we have the 3 lists in Schedule 7 union list, state list, and concurrent list. So in a federal constitution, this distribution of power is the acid test of the existence of federalism in a constitution. So notwithstanding the various strong unitary features, the Constitution of India is called federal because we have this in our constitution in the form of Schedule 7. But say if a state law comes in conflict with the central law, which law will prevail? Applying the doctrine of repugnancy, the courts have declared in many cases that the central law will prevail. So if any of the provision is repugnant to any of the provisions in a union law is repugnant to any of the provision in the state law will be void to the extent of the repugnancy with the central law. This is known as the doctrine of repugnancy. Now, there are two other very important doctrines known as doctrine of colorable legislation and doctrine of pith and substance. Now, what is doctrine of colorable legislation? This again relates to the conflict of laws made by the union legislature and the state legislatures. Say a union legislature legislates on a subject which is common with the subject of a state legislature. Now, if the law is challenged in the court of law, in the Supreme Court, then applying the doctrine of colorable legislation, the court will examine whether the legislature which is objecting to the law have established that the law enacted by the other legislature is invasion of its rights under the constitution. Then if the other legislature concerned convinces the court that I have enacted law on my own subject. Let me give an example, things will be clear. In FN Valsara versus State of Bombay, the union legislature, the state legislature, the state of Bombay enacted a law according to which it imposed an entry tax on foreign liquor in the state of Bombay. Now, this law was challenged in the Supreme Court by the union government on the ground that import duty can only be imposed by the central government. And therefore, the law made by the state is a colorable exercise. Colorable exercise means something which you cannot do directly, you do it indirectly. So you are camouflaging our subject as your subject, and you are invading into our subject, and therefore it is unconstitutional. But then the Supreme Court said, applying the doctrine of pith and substance. What is pith and substance? The actual content of the law, if it is within the competence of the state legislature which is enacted it, then notwithstanding it coincidentally touches the subject of another legislature, the law is not void. So in this case, it was decided it is not a culpable exercise of power, it is not void according to the doctrine of culpable legislation, but it is valid according to the doctrine of pith and substance. So we can arrive to a conclusion that doctrine of pith and substance and doctrine of culpable legislation are mutually exclusive. So if a law is declared valid applying the doctrine of pith and substance, it cannot be declared invalid by applying the doctrine of colorable legislation. So these are two most important doctrines with respect to a conflict of law, the conflict of laws of the center and the states. So these are by and large the doctrines which are evolved by the apex court while interpretation of the Constitution of India.